All right, so we are recording. Great, everybody. So, Michel, did you want to start us off?
Yeah, so welcome everybody to our this week's edition of our Cercle. So this is our third meeting together. We've had a chance to go over the introduction in chapter 1 in our first meeting. Following that, we went to obviously chapters 2 and 3. Last week it was Canadian Thanksgiving, so we took a break to let everyone spend their Saturday mornings with their families. And we're back this week for chapters 4 and 5. And of course, we have a special treat this week because we have one of the co-authors of the book who is with us of Learning Transformed. So we have Eric Sheninger who is here with us this morning. So we're really happy to have you with us, Eric, this morning. Welcome.
I'm glad to be here. And just so you know, even though I'm the co-author, it was all my idea to write this book. So, just so you all know.
I know how you feel. Oops, I just lost connection.
Oh, you're still there.
You're here.
Are you? Okay, I can't see you, so.
We can still see you. You're all good. You're all good.
All right, I'll hand it back to you, Joël, while I take care of my technical difficulties here.
No problem. No problem. So, chapter 4, designing learner-centered spaces. So, key number 4, learning spaces must become learner-centered. And so, basically, when I was going through this chapter, there's a few things that hit home for me. One of the first things that did was at page 104, where we talk about the typical school design, and I really like the term cells and bells, because that really clicked, because obviously it's still what it looks like, right? So we're slowly transforming things in some schools, and others it's a little bit slower, but it is coming along. And the part that hits home for me is how much we're still maybe not considering research when thinking about the structure of our buildings and the way that we're organizing everything inside of those buildings. And what I loved about this book and about these chapters is that Eric and Thomas have put in all that research that we're able to refer to and bring back to our staff and say, listen, why is it that we're using more neutral colors than bright colors, for example? We talked about that in those 2 chapters. So I think it's fantastic to be able to bring it back and say, listen, I'm not just saying this to say it. There's actually research that's backing this up, and that's saying that, this is what's best for learning. And that's what we need to be able to put forward in our buildings, because it's what's best for kids. So for learning to transform, I think that we need to transform the spaces. And I don't know, I'd like to just shoot that out to anybody that would like to take the question. In which ways do you think that we can, Eric will take it. Yeah. When we talk about transforming spaces to be able to transform learning, what does that look like? Eric, I'll let you take that one.
So what I'm going to try to do is, as I'm listening, I'm going to throw up a summary of one of the research studies that we looked at. So I'm going to try to share my screen, and I'm going to pray that it works, because after that, I have pictures of some of the schools that I'm partnered with here in the United States, so I can actually show you what schools that I'm working in have actually done to transform the spaces, and even talk a little bit about how it's actually improved achievement, because that's a big part of my work. And, I just want to say, when Tom and I decided to write this book, we were a little frustrated because, listen, I love Twitter, I love Pinterest, I love Instagram, but just because it sounds good on Twitter and looks good on Pinterest and Instagram doesn't mean it's an effective practice. And no one was really talking about the research. Now, I'm not saying that everything that Tom and I wrote about is correct. Well, not correct, but that you have to, buy into it. But nobody was talking about research and actually evidence that leads to efficacy. I mean, that's really why we wrote the book. So I am going to now try to share my screen. All right. So you should be able to see Joel instead of me. So here we go. So, this was one. Can everyone see this image?
Yeah.
All right. So, this was one of the studies that we focused on. And, based upon what Joel just said, when you look at these 6 elements, everything from furniture, layout, color, temperature, I know in the northeastern part of the United States, when it is hot and humid, and like it was in my school in New Jersey, learners didn't want to learn, teachers didn't want to teach, administrators did not want to administrate. So temperature is a big factor. Acoustics, lighting, but also we have to be aware of overstimulation. So, as you go through chapter 4, you can see, this was the Zhang et al. Study. But this is my daughter's school from last year. Not only were they flexible learning spaces, they were a blended learning campus. Bring your own technology for kindergartner through grade 5, portfolio-based assessment, Google Classroom, and Seesaw. And their achievement last year, in the school's first year of existence, 93% of the kids were proficient or higher. And in the 5th grade, my daughter's classes, 98% of the kids were proficient or higher. They weren't doing homework at home. They were openly exploring, but you can't have flexible spaces if you don't have flexible learning. And I'll show you that in a minute, then I'll open up some questions. But on the right, that's a grade 1 student, who could manage her device. This is a different school that I was working with in the state of Texas. And what they did, and this is a high poverty district, and what they did is 75% of their wall space is whiteboards. So in this case, the teachers are getting these grade 4 kids up, moving around, they're collaboratively solving problems, and then they just keep rotating. You would see the problem number 2, problem number 3, and there were 5 problems throughout the room. This is going back to Wells Elementary School in Cyprus, where I live. This was, again, the school my daughter went to last year. I was the job embedded consultant in the school all last year. This is a kindergarten classroom. So you can see how when you look at the research that we presented in chapter 4, here's what it looks like in action. This was a grade 4 classroom in that school. In that green tent, that's where kids go in and do video reflections on not just what they learned, but why they learned it and how they will use it outside of school. And you can see that it doesn't have to be expensive, fancy furniture. I mean, those are beach chairs, beanbag chairs. This was a school that I'm working in Pennsylvania. When you think about learning spaces, research has shown that movement is critical to learning. This teacher wrote grants. And these grade 7 kids have pedaling desks, stationary bikes in the classroom, and they're also one-to-one. In this same district in Pennsylvania, they found out that 70% of the lockers were not being used by their kids. So what they do, they ripped out almost all their lockers, in-house, replaced them with charging bars in all the hallways. Not only can you see that's what it looks like during passing time, but here's kids in the one-to-one school. I think these were grades 6 through 8, actively using their devices. And you look at their devices, even though they're in this common area, they're on task for what they were learning in their classrooms. Going back to my daughter's school last year, this was a grade 5 classroom. What I want you to look at is, look at the kids' faces, look at the devices. When you have a foundation in solid pedagogy, and that's what we talked about in chapter 2 and chapter 3. When you have that solid pedagogical foundation, kids will be on task. This was the opening part of the lesson. That's a driller for BP who works on an offshore rig off the coast of Galveston. But again, you can see choice seating, devices, movable furniture. We don't got to look at that now. I love this example. These are grade 3s. So what these kids are doing is they're solving math problems. So you can see how they're on beanbags, they're on the floor. But after they solve the problems, you can see all these spaces. Then the kids go on and are explaining how they solve the problem on a tool called Flipgrid. They're doing video reflections explaining their thinking. The point here is, again, how the flexible space has to really reflect, or there has to be pedagogical change for it to be of substance. And there's what the kids actually look like. They actually look at all the video reflections from their peers, and the teacher could look at them all. This is, again, still in Wells Elementary. Those are grade 1s on the right. Those are kids as part of their blended learning rotation. They are openly just lounging out in the hallways. But again, you know why they're on task? It goes back to Key number 2 and key number 3, learning's made personal. We use the rigor relevance framework in this school to ensure that thinking was at the higher levels of Bloom's taxonomy, but that kids were applying their learning in more relevant ways. So what you're seeing here in terms of learning spaces is all grounded in the rigor relevance framework for common vision, common language, common expectations. The kid on the left, actively fidgeting. So, and then I think this might be my last image just in this deck, but imagine walking into a classroom in May, and this is where you see kids. I mean, spaces should be comfortable, flexible, inviting, but again, there has to be accountability. There has to be that return on instruction. Oh, and this was my school. I guess I could end with this. So my building was built in 1928. We had school branded charging stations in all of our common areas. We had Keurig coffee machines by every charging station, thinking games in all our common spaces. And the bottom right, that was our nap room. So I just wanted to show you some things to get your brains going, but I really wanted, and that's just a snapshot of what we've seen, but I'm not going to lie. What you just saw is definitely not the standard. I'm in schools all the time, and it really is cells and bells, desks and rows. And I can show you the potential. I can show you, we could talk about how schools are doing it and improving achievement. But unfortunately, across the world, we still have a mindset that kids got to be in these desks. It's still predominantly direct instruction. When I go into high schools, the kids are bored out of their minds. It's uncomfortable. And I'll leave you with this. Would you want to learn in the same spaces as all of your kids? And would you want to learn under the same conditions as your kids? So I will stop there.
You know, what's funny, Eric, you say that is that we probably did learn under the same conditions that our kids are learning today, unfortunately. So it's one of the ironies of it all. I have a question for you. I'll start things off if you don't mind.
Well,
I guess one of my main reflections when it comes to learning spaces is how do you align, and you said it well this morning, that you can't have flexible learning spaces without having flexible learning or flexible teaching. And I guess my challenge is to align both. So I've had situations where, you know, one teacher who is working a little bit, you know, more comfortable, I'll say, with flexible learning, for example, will ask me for, you know, I'd like some tables and chairs. I'd like to do this. I'd like to do that. Absolutely. So we'll put that in. Now the teacher next door says, hey, that looks great. I would love that. But they're not, the pedagogy is not necessarily matching the flexible, you know, furniture and the flexible setup. And, you know, at one point you kind of get frustrated spending money on all these great things, but they're not being used correctly or for what they were intended. So I guess the question is, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? Is it the flexible seating? Is it the flexible learning? Or is it a little bit of both?
Well, if you ask me, and this is only my opinion, you know, you can't put the cart before the horse. We have not learned our lesson across the world. We spend billions of dollars on the stuff, whether it be technology, whether it be programs, whether it be furniture. And here's the deal. We could get all that stuff, but if the pedagogy does not change, then who really cares? And again, I get pushback on this on Twitter all the time, but I can speak from a lens of being not only a teacher, but a principal in a school where parents spoke 40 different languages, 1/3 of our population classified special needs, a building built in 1928, having no money. I'm just speaking in, you know, the realistic world that we live in. So with all of it, it really comes down to, let's put all the stuff aside. If you don't have good teaching and an environment that really empowers kids to learn in these powerful ways, then all the stuff just does not make a difference. But I want to go back to your point and your question. And I'm going to go back to my screen share because I want to show something. And again, it's like, this is what's great because I just presented on this in Utah yesterday. But I kind of want to show you the pedagogical changes that happened. I showed you the spaces. Now I'm going to show you what it looked like in terms of the pedagogy. So I'm going to go back to my screen share. All right, and go back to here. So this school was about blended learning. And here's a big difference. A lot of what people think is blended learning is blended instruction. Blended instruction is not bad. Blended instruction is what the teacher does with tech. Not saying that's bad. Blended learning is where students use technology to have control over pace, place, and pace. So when you think about place, what you just saw in those images before was agency. Kids had choice, but they had choice because this was sort of a pedagogical foundation in terms of, what you saw those kids doing. I'm going to show you some of the tasks very quickly, but I wanted you to take a look at this image because, when you think about flexible spaces, what do you want going on there? You want differentiation. You want to personalize to their interests. You want to align virtual and classroom instruction. You want to have a balance. What you saw there, you saw kids reading books. You didn't see kids just glued on devices. It has to be focused on the kid, adaptable, authentic, but you also have to change and adapt the curriculum. So let me show you some of the tasks. And this is really, again, why the spaces work. It's all about the blended rotations that you did not see. People will focus on the space. They'll look at the furniture. They'll see these kids on devices. But more often than not, this is what they don't see. I did hundreds of classroom visits last year. And when I go in, this is what is guiding those activities. Now, in this particular example, 3rd grade, you can see there's a seesaw scavenger hunt, but there's also independent reading. But do you see that poetry box? In this one example, kids would rotate through and go through a flipped poetry lesson. Kids didn't just control place, they control pace as well. Now, you can see other learners in the background going through another activity, but this is the strength and the real benefit that flexible learning spaces can provide is to really take blended learning to the next level. Here's another example, grade 1 rotations. Now, you can see those computer stations and that tablet station. On those tools, on those stations, it's adaptive learning tools. The teacher is getting data on all of her kids. When she meets with those kids at teacher table, then she's able to look at that data in real time and work on the specific needs of those kids.
Eric, I got a question.
Yes.
Yeah. For the different stations, were they timed, or was it basically when the child felt that they were done with one, they would move on to the next one, or was there a bell every 10 minutes that would indicate?
They're most of them are timed because the teachers want to get the kids through each rotation. But with the flipped poetry lesson, the kids could go, read it over until they're done. And then more often than not, if they finish, there's an extension activity where they'll go to another activity within that activity. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So this is the last example I'll share before I shut up. But this was one of the best examples I saw last May. The fires are more difficult activities. So the kids had to do tic-tac-toe. They got to choose any 3 activities on this choice board. You could see number 2, number 6, and number 7 involve technology. The other ones do not. So I just want to show again, and here's to the point. When let me turn off this screen share. Come on. When I started working with them, brand new school, and I work with them 2 days in August and then every day throughout the year. The goal was they had this brand new school, all these spaces. And the big fear was they wanted to really leverage those spaces and show how they could really be used to transform learning. So we worked for the better part of the year on assessment, on feedback, on creating tasks where we scaffolded questions and the tasks. So we spent so much time getting that foundation in place. A lot of those images were the result that you saw at the end of the year because of all the time that we had spent. And that really ties into later key number 5, which we'll discuss, is professional learning. Hey, it doesn't have to be an investment. Did the school invest in me? Yes. But there has to be an investment in schools. Professional learning, the research has shown, it has to be ongoing and it has to be job embedded to actually matter. All right, I'm going to shut up.
You're getting ahead of yourself.
Well, I'm actually, well, no, it's your fault. It's your question. But you can see all the connections here.
Yeah.
You know, key number 5 connects to, you know, all the different keys for the most point. Learning spaces connects to all the keys on learning. So everything is like interconnected here. Absolutely.
And there's so many things that's been clicking in my mind as I'm reading through this chapter. You know, I'm even thinking about the research that talked about, because in our schools often we'll have these fundraising activities because we want to buy these big expensive structures to put in the schoolyard. And then I read the part where it's, you know, research showed that those types of investments, the return on instruction or on actually having an impact on student learning was actually not that big. So
yeah, the thing is too, we have to be not really, you think about that return on instruction, we have to be critical and really think about how is this investment not only going to help kids learn, but help the most kids learn. And that's something that we really need to think about, that we really don't, you know, I was in a district the other day, they spend $2.1 million a year on their MacBook lease. Okay. 10 years they've been 1-to-1. And then I go, why am I here? They're like, Eric, nothing has changed in 10 years.
Ouch. Ouch.
So you get to work for 1.5 million and it's a deal.
Hey, you know what? It is. Yeah. So what other questions you all have on learning spaces?
Well, I've got a question, and it's maybe it comes to maybe one of the challenges that we see in our schools when it comes to, you know, transforming those spaces, and then how we want to transform the pedagogy. I think one of the things that frustrate people often when they, you know, the teachers want to see the change, they want to change, but it almost seems like they need to see the furniture and the things in the classroom before changing. They almost need that validation for some reason. So I know that's a big challenge. You know, how do we get them to start changing pedagogy before putting, you know, spending these thousands of dollars? And the other challenge I find is that in our schools, we're seeing pockets of innovation, right? We're seeing pockets, you know, teachers here and there that are doing fantastic things in their classrooms. The pictures you were showing us, Eric, you know, we have some classrooms that look like that also, with different spaces and things going on, but it's not all the classrooms. And the challenge is, well, how do we get everybody on board? And you talked about that in your book a little bit, you know, at page 111, how do we make it so that it's a team effort? We've got 2 or 3 teachers out of 15 that are doing these fantastic things. Everybody knows about it because we're sharing, we're talking about it, we're telling our story on Facebook. Everybody knows it's going on, but it's just in maybe 2 or 3 classrooms out of 15.
That goes back to key number 1, leadership and culture lay the foundation. What you just saw in those images that I shared, it's every classroom, it's every teacher, but here's why it works. It's the administrators. The administrators have rolled up their sleeves. Everyone in that school believes. If you don't want, I'll tell you right now, if you're not drinking the Kool-Aid in that example of the school, you feel uncomfortable. And guess what? You can transfer somewhere else. That what they've learned is it's not the right fit for everyone because our mindset is so traditional. Now, when we talk about scalability, I mean, that's another thing. Again, I love social media, but if you push people to not tell you, but to show you the evidence of the practice, guess what? They can't. Even some of my really good friends, you know, the evidence isn't there. It doesn't have to be data. It does not have to be data. But when you talk about I'm always asked, okay, Eric, what are some great examples of schools that are doing this? Here's the problem. Like Joel said, we have isolated pockets of excellence. At scale, it's very hard because there has to be a commitment across all the different levels of leadership, teacher leadership, building leadership, organizational leadership. Now, I think when you talk with people about, they see these things, they see, and they don't even get, I could talk about Pinterest. Don't even get me started about teachers pay teachers. I mean, oh my goodness. So many of the stuff on there is just low level. But again, hey, but what happens is people will see a picture, and I see this all the time, like, oh my God, that's awesome. I want beanbag chairs. And then I come in and I just knock them down. I'm like, okay, well, what's a beanbag chair going to do for your kid? Oh, they can be comfortable. All right, let me see what your assessment looks like. Let me see what your instructional design looks like. And then I see it and I go, I got to be careful with what I say because, I got to build relationships, but it's just not changing. And I've seen kids in flexible spaces totally comfortable playing Fortnite, scrolling through Instagram, because the instructional design is not there.
I'm really happy that you said that. I feel really great now. So,
but it's again, and this is the tough part. I think that we all have an obligation, I think, to step up and not just do virtual fist bumps, high fives, and just share platitudes. The key that we had hoped for Learning Transformed was to get more people to celebrate the great work they're doing, to unearth all the research, but to also be empowered to share the great stuff that they're doing. When I present, I challenge people. I go ahead and Google my school. Look at what we did with our data. Go ahead and challenge me. Oh, Eric, you say assessment has to change. Well, okay, I can show you that. We talk about flipped classrooms. I can show amazing examples of what my teachers did and what other teachers are doing. And I think that the more we can share, and it doesn't have to be data, show how you're using rubrics to really assess kids. You utilize video to show what kids are doing. But here's what I'm going to do. Joel talked about Twitter. Sorry, everybody. And by the way, you all can interrupt me at any time, but I just keep seeing this stuff. And again, I like to share evidence. So what I'm going to do now is going back to my school. If you really want to see consistency in terms of everything I just talked about, if you go to the hashtag Explore Wells, that's the hashtag from the school. So I'm going to go down and you're going to start seeing, there you go. You can again see the learning spaces, but here's what I challenge these teachers and administrators to do. Share context. Don't just share a picture. So those are kindergartners. Oh my God, look at that. Let me keep going because I saw some great examples the other day. So again, here's second graders. Again, you could see the flexible spaces in action. There were some really good ones yesterday. So I'm going through, movement. But if you scroll through here, I'm not saying everyone is a great example of pedagogy. But if you scroll through, you will find some gems. Oh, here we go. So again, look at these are all the teachers sharing. Here's first graders doing a lab. But you can go through. I mean, I'm not going to take up any more of our time. But back to Joel's point, make no mistake about it. This school is not only transforming learning, they're sharing examples of how it's being done, and they have the achievement data to back it up.
And that's really important because and you need that data. And I love the pictures, and it brings me back to a Facebook post we did this week. I was talking about it with Dan just before we started our session. Our grade 1-2 class we're really hitting hard on oral communication, developing that, and also reading. So those are our main objectives for that classroom. And they invited me to go, and I spent a little bit of time with them there. And then they had this activity where the kids were going to read a book out loud, but it was actually one of the grade 1 students that was going to act as the teacher. So, you know, she had the book, and then she was guiding everybody, all the other students, through the reading, and they were doing such a fantastic job. And we had taken a little bit of video a few weeks prior to that, and already from back then to now, we were able to see how much they had improved in terms of reading, in terms of oral communication. So we said, you know what, how about we take a video of that, because this is fantastic. You see the layout of the classroom, you see a space where kids were able to write, and then you see the space where the kids were able to read. So, you know, we just took a piece of video, maybe about a minute and a half, and we put that out on Facebook, and it's a great example of the fantastic work that's being done. Maybe not the data side, but, you know, anybody that's going to look at that video is going to say, hey, this is fantastic, and these kids are improving. And because they're improving, I think it's a proof in itself that, you know, the pedagogy obviously is working. If these kids are improving, you know what I mean?
Listen, your stakeholders are ultimately going to be the ones screaming for data.
Yeah.
You know, as a parent, my kids are high performing because of privilege. I don't need the data. I want my kids to love learning.
Absolutely.
Look at the kids' work. But I think if you're in a situation where either you're asking for or someone's asking you to invest in furniture, here's the question you ask. How will learning change? Plain and simple. And if they cannot articulate that, well, guess what? You shouldn't ask for the stuff, and you shouldn't buy the stuff.
Absolutely.
Well, just to kind of, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, non, vas-y, Linda. José, excusez-moi.
Just to kind of piggyback on that, because when we opened the school, we did go with all flexible seating and flexible classrooms, and we did some training with the staff, and we like encouraged them. And then like 1 month in, I'm walking the hallways and I see all the desks in a row, and I'm just shaking my head going, oh man. So I kind of had to go back and kind of keep it going. So I've got about, I mean, that's kind of the hardest part is we were given all of the material, and brand new school with like interactive TVs in every single classroom that some are using properly and some are using it as a glorified smart board or a projector. So, I mean, there's still a lot of work to do on getting them on board and looking at how they can better use what they've been given rather than going back to their old habits. So we've been working a lot on activities and centers and trying to get them in, and some teachers who are on board, I've had, you know, them open their classroom so their colleagues can go in and see what they're doing. And it's slowly starting to change, but it's still not quite where I want it to be. So that's why I really enjoyed reading these 2 chapters that really help kind of give me some ideas as to how I can get back to basics and work with the staff to kind of keep going on that shift and getting them to use some of the resources that they've been given. And I had one teacher, and I had a couple of teachers come up to me asking the same questions. I want to buy a couch for my classroom. I'm like, that's great, but why? And she was actually able to explain it to me. And she's one of the few that I did invest in it. And when I go up into her classroom, I see exactly what the pictures you've shown me. I see high school kids learning like draped on a sofa, or, you know, just so comfortable sitting on carpet on the floor against cushions. And a lot of teachers have brought stuff from home and have like created these amazing classrooms. And the great part is that they're sharing and they're letting other colleagues come in and take a look at what they're doing. So there's a little bit of a shift kind of happening, but I think that's where I'm struggling, is with the 1 or 2 teachers that I have that are really in that older mindset, that traditional mindset. And I can't seem to get them to come over to the dark side, I guess. That's what I would say, to come over to our side. And that's where I'm really struggling, because I could see so much potential, but I don't quite know how to get them over.
Oh, you know, it's the 5% give us 95% of our problems. And you know, I think you got to leverage on your colleagues. Honestly, you can only do so much. You're not going to be able to change them. you need to get some of those teachers in the trenches that have a different type of relationship. Let's be honest. You know, there's a different relationship between teacher to teacher and teacher to administrator. So I would, you know, pull aside some of your high flyers and say, listen, I need your help. You know, and I'm not saying that'll work either, but what we learned is if the majority of people are doing it, then that small percentage has a choice. Either they just really don't care. And if they really don't care, well, then you got to do the hard part about leadership and start to force them out if they don't want to change. But hopefully that they'll respond differently to that. But sometimes there's only so much you can do. And then it's about why we became leaders, because sometimes we got to make sure that we're doing what's best for kids, which is getting rid of those people that are not there for the best. And I'm not saying they're bad teachers. That's not what I'm saying. But if they have all these options, the research has shown that it can lead to improvements. You know, I bet you if you ask those kids, you know, how would you describe learning in those classrooms? It might not be very positive. So, you know, having a conversation with that teacher or those teachers is, hey, would you want to learn in this same space, same conditions, and see what he or she would say? But it's definitely not easy.
No. It's a great question. It's maybe a great segue into chapter 5. And I've got maybe a suggestion that something that I did with a teacher actually a few weeks ago. Teacher that was looking to transform, you know, their learning space and transform the pedagogy. And the idea was, well, I'd like to go and visit another classroom that's got all those things into place and that's rolling. So just keep in mind when we do stuff like that, where we'll, you know, spend some money to get a teacher to go and do some professional development where they're visiting another school. There's a big difference between when a teacher goes into that classroom and there's no kids and there's nothing going on and they just see, you know, the setup and things like that, versus if they go and visit the classroom when the kids are there and when the teacher's in action and you can actually see and smell and touch that pedagogy. So big difference there. So my teacher actually went over, and what we did was we split the day 3 quarters where they were in the classroom when the kids were there in action to see how it was functioning, how the pedagogy was working within that space, and how those elements were actually levers to learning. And then, you know, the last quarter of the day was to be able to sit down with that teacher and have that back and forth and have that feedback and to give some ideas on how you can plan out your learning based on, or not based on, but and then leverage whatever equipment or couch or bean bags that you have in your classroom. So I think that's a really powerful piece when it comes to professional development for our teachers. Eric mentioned job embedded. That's the best way to learn.
And
right?
I saw a text from someone. Hold on. Okay, Natalie, I've had the opposite problem. Teachers want to change their practice. This year, the students have rebelled and some parents got on board with their kids to try to stop us from changing teacher practice. I can speak to that because all that stuff that I showed you at my daughter's school last year, the entitled parents, my friends, didn't like it. The parents here and kids, again, we condition our kids. That the problem is, you know, our kids don't know any better. They think that traditional schooling is good for them. And we saw it too. Our high-performing kids didn't want to use devices in school. So going back to my daughter's school, here's what happened. Having some beers in the evenings with my friends. And once I had a few too many, they knew I was the coach. And they're like, Eric, why are the teachers not teaching? You know, why do kids just get to relax and lay around? There's no teaching going on. So here's what happened. You have to have your kids and parents learn how to unlearn and relearn, just like some of the adult educators. So I went to my friends. I go, did you go to blended curriculum night? No? Did you go to blended learning night? Are you looking at your kids' benchmark scores? We do traditional benchmarks once a month, grades K through 12. I knew how my daughter was. Have you talked to your kid? So sometimes the high-performing kids, because they've learned that they just want to know how to get the right answer. And when you make it uncomfortable and you really push them to think, they don't think that's learning. So we kind of have to teach them in the long run that it's a better way. So you just got to be patient. But the more education you do in the beginning of the year with the kids to explain how this is going to help them. And again, it also comes down to professional learning, not just for teachers, but for community members, for parents.
Yeah, we had a parent night where we had some parents come in, and it was great because the 2 staff members who joined me that night to explain, like, our afternoons, we really wanted to stop the bells. We wanted to get rid of that. And the kids were like, well, how will I know when to take a break? I'm like, when do you need one? Because why is it at 1:40 you absolutely need a break every day? And they just didn't get it. And I was like, oh my God.
When I work from home, I got no bells. You know, the only time I hear bells is when I'm working in schools. Oh my goodness. And you know, when you go from the public sector to the private sector, it amazes me how school is just a false dichotomy when you think about the real world.
Yeah, the best thing that we had this week was on Tuesday we had some former students, because on Monday we had no school. So on Tuesday we had some former students that one of them is she's working on her master's. One went to university, then changed to college. We had a former student who had started college, quit, and now she's a mom. So we had really the variety of panel in front of the students. And one of them who had just refused anything that we wanted to try at the school throughout her 4 years. She was, I hate to say it, but the most miserable student. Like, really, she just hated everything about it. And she looked at all the ones that, because she knew approximately which students were not too happy with our way of doing our afternoons. And she's like, would you guys just suck it up? She's like, because you guys are like awesome here. So like, they're preparing you for what is coming next year and the year after. And we have a change a little bit in the last few days of our students. They're like, okay, well, maybe this isn't so bad, because we want to do a lot of project-based learning. And to them, it's like, well, if the teacher doesn't say it, how do I know it's true?
Right. Yeah, I know. I mean, fine. If you want to know something's true, just Google it. I'm not just saying Google it, but then we have to evaluate the source. And you know, information is here. And again, a lot of stuff of what is taught to our kids. Let's be honest. I work with schools, and I just say, you know what? I could have Googled all that. Why are we doing that to kids?
Yeah.
Even with adults, go to professional learning. I mean, honestly, if people aren't actively applying what they're learning, you know, I use an example all the time when we talk about scaffolding techniques. Whether you're doing Kahoot, quizzes, Quiznetic, oh, people love it. It's like bar trivia without the alcohol, but that's not very fun. But here's the deal. When you look at the Kahoot questions, low level, multiple choice. So how are you scaffolding after that? So when we think about this transition, you know, and I'm glad you brought that up, Natalie, because that's something we could just, that really comes to key number 7. When you really talk, when you get to that chapter of the book, it really is about how we build more community awareness, appreciation. And when we talk about community, that's our learners too. It's not just our parents, but it's also our students. But when we think about our own professional learning and how we grow, you know, key number 5, you know, really is about not just using Twitter to form a social media for a personal learning network. It's in your systems. How are you making learning personal as adults? You know, one thing we did, my media specialist, Laura Fleming, if you're not connected with Laura Fleming on Twitter, please connect with her. She's amazing. And I could, oh, you know what? I shouldn't do it. Maybe I will. If you all make me, I'll show you how she transformed a space in my former school. But she created our own digital badge micro-credential platform where teachers could select a screencast of a tool. They watched it just like in a blended learning situation. Then they had to apply what they learned aligned to our standards, scope and sequence, create a task, which we then evaluated. Once we did, we then gave them a badge, which went into a portfolio. You know, we hosted our own conference at my former school, and we had over 100 sessions. Most of my teachers were the presenters, but they could go choose and all this stuff. You know, you think about Genius Hour and the Google 80/20 model. We implemented that for teachers in a school. I freed up time for all of my teachers, 2 to 3 periods per week, to follow their learning passions, anything they wanted, and they created their own unique portfolios. So when we talk about making learning personal, yes, you can have a personal learning network on Twitter. And hopefully you all do. If not, I'll just blame Joel and I'll just bash him on Twitter, because then he's not a very good co-facilitator of this. But when you think about making learning personal, it's just I say it this way. You know, when I work with adults, I try to treat them as kids, and I want them to feel like they're learners. If I can't show the purpose, if I can't get them to see why this is important, how they'll use it, well, then I'm not doing as good of a job as I can as a teacher. So it's the same thing, you know, when we think about following our own passions. Following our passions is fine, but how does it actually fundamentally change our practice? And I hear people all the time saying that Twitter is their best PD tool, whatever, and I don't debate that. But then when I get to go beneath the layers, because what I'll do is, I'm not creepy, but I will do Google searches and I'll try to find evidence that it's actually changed. It's interesting what you can find out about some people, about what they have not done, yet they're telling you what to do. So just keep that in mind. I got to stop. I'm going to go down a rabbit hole that I don't want to go down. But, you know, when you think about it, it's how you create those options within your school-based system. And if your school doesn't provide it, then you have social media to go down that avenue. You know, one of my favorite ones, if you've never used it before, and I'm putting it in the chat, is edweb.net. Edweb has live webinars. They're all archived. There's over 100 different communities of practice. You can join, follow it at your own pace, and then when you answer questions, you get a certificate of completion. So you can follow all of that. I mean, and it's free. It's free. Another one of my favorites for professional learning is Flipboard. You know, Flipboard turns your is an app that you create your own personalized magazine based on your interests. You select the category, it goes there. One of my not new favorites, but oh my goodness, LinkedIn is a hotbed of professional learning now. It's a different conversation than what you'll see on Twitter. There's threaded conversations, more depth, you know. So those are just some options for making learning personal.
They're even offering training now.
Yeah, but I'll shut up now again, and like any of you ask questions, and it could be on those 2 chapters or anything you want.
I think what you've been talking about, Eric, you actually talked about a few of the things on my Christmas list from my school board. The badging, I've been talking about badging for the last couple of years now, and because I've seen systems where they actually use it and it works. Everybody loves getting a little recognition, you know, when they're investing in themselves. And badging is something that could be easy, not expensive, and you just roll it out, and it encourages people to go and get that professional development, I think, or at least get them to take those first steps. And I think it comes down to often you don't know what you don't know. And you mentioned it here at page 142, where we talk about school systems are not helping teachers understand how to improve. We're quick to say, go on Twitter and, you know, we're going to do this for PD, but do people actually know how to improve so that it can go actually into the deeper levels and actually have an impact on their practice? So
what you're talking about is we have a lack of accountability.
Yeah.
Here's the deal. We spend so much money on tech programs and PD, but are we holding ourselves and our staff accountable for what they've learned, how it's changed practice, and how they will turnkey what they've learned to sort of spread the wealth? And let's talk about accountability. Accountability in all these areas, all these keys, is, I think, one of the areas where we can show growth, no matter what country we're in, no matter what conditions, is we have to hold ourselves accountable for growth. So you can't say that this is the best learning in any context if you can't show how it's actually changed your instructional design, you know, how it's changed your assessment, how it's improved feedback, how it's allowed kids to truly own their learning, but create artifacts that demonstrate conceptual mastery aligned to scope and sequence, standards, all that stuff. So,
and we have to be able to show people how to do that, because they don't inherently know how to do it.
True.
You know?
And you know, when I go through and I'll do the keys, and then I'll have people create a digital task.
Yeah.
And then I'll have them self-assess using the rigor relevance framework and say, hey, what quad did it fall in? Is it A, low rigor, low relevance? Is it B, high rigor, low relevance? Is it C, high rigor, low relevance? Or is it high rigor, high relevance? And, you know, where is it at? And then I have them in groups discuss and do that, take that critical lens. Because if we don't take that critical lens to our work, sometimes what we learn isn't of an effective practice, and yet we keep doing it because we don't know any better.
Or we keep doing it because it's what's easier, right? Correct. It's what works within the system that we have in place now. And when we talk about showing people how to do it, well, then you got to bring in, and that's what a little bit of the work that we're trying to do, and the work that actually in particular Linda tries to do at the board level is how do we empower the people up there and give them the necessary knowledge to be able to go into the schools when they do, and be able to show the people, how do I learn? How do I get better?
Yep.
It's not just about going on Twitter, like you said, and looking up hashtags and saying a whole bunch of stuff, because anybody can say pretty much anything. But how do I actually translate that into action? And it's not everybody that knows how to do that.
Right. And Josie, thanks for posting the first tweet. I really appreciate that. The rest of you are slacking big time. Oh, goodness.
There's just too much going on. We have about 2 minutes left with Eric. I don't know if anybody has a final question. We have the time for maybe one more question about professional development or learning spaces, or I would imagine pretty much anything if someone had something for Eric.
While you all think, I got to show you this. It's going to blow your minds, because all the time I hear, well, Eric, we can't do this. We don't have money, blah, blah, blah. So I want to show you something, and this goes back to Laura Fleming. So you think about your questions, and if I go over the time, I'll give you some time for questions. But here's why I hired Laura Fleming. That is what our library looked like. This is why kids didn't go there to read. It was just a mess, okay? This was stage 2. Same space. This was our maker space. We got Lego tables, makey-makeys, little bits. But I want you to go back and look at this, because when people say this can't be done, original, stage 2, this is what the space looks like today. The same exact space. You want to know why? Because Laura showed efficacy in the space. She showed kids that all of them were geniuses, that all of them were learners, and that they learned different ways. She empowered kids like never before. Kids are, now we had the data to back it up too. Our graduation rate was the 99.3%. So what happened was the board and superintendent are the ones that funded this space. Why? Because the kids demanded it. So when you think about going back to key number 1, leadership is about action. It's not about position, title, or power. You just saw a real leader in my school, and that was Laura Fleming, my teacher librarian, media specialist. So the idea here is whether you're taking the action at the classroom level or you're inspiring others to take action, you then got to share. And that was the one thing that we did better than everyone else. We weren't the most innovative. We weren't the highest achieving. We were better than everyone else at sharing what we were doing, aligned to research and having evidence to back it up. Any other questions? I know I talked a lot, but that's what you all get for being quiet. Then I just keep talking.
I have a question. Is there a French version available, or you don't mind if I take parts of your art? Well, I call it art because it's leading me to do better job. If I take parts of your book and translate it or traduce it in French?
No, as long as you cite it appropriately, that's fine. You know, and the challenge, what I've learned about publishing, oh my goodness, you talk about headaches. You think there's tough to change education. It's tough in the private sector. Is, you know, I have conversations all the time all over the world about people that want to translate the books. And that what we have to do is get a partner in another country, like a organization that will buy the translation rights and translate it to that language. I mean, I would love all my books to be translated in French, because I believe French is spoken in over 40 different countries in the world. That's why we offered French in my high school. And, yeah, as long as you cite accordingly, that's fine.
Awesome.
Well, thank you.
And, you know, talking about, and maybe to finish off, last thought for professional development, well, you know, that's exactly what we're doing here right now. You know, we've got principals, vice principals, we've got board level people that are, you know, that are leaders, that are, we're taking a hold of our leadership, and because we want to be able to to learn. We want to be able to have impact. We want to be able to have an influence, and we want to be able to have the tools necessary to go into action. You know, exactly what Eric was saying. So we appreciated, Eric, that you're there and you're helping us, giving us ideas and helping us to be able to do that, to go into action.
Well, and that's the key, is that we can talk here about the ideas. You all can talk. What I hope you will do is down the road, share publicly, AKA use the hashtag LT8Keys, and share what has actually changed. And I'm telling you right now, when you think about, I think there's a lot of opportunity in Canada to share efficacy in your work, just like there's a lot of opportunity for people here in the United States. And I tell people all the time, people want to have those concrete examples. They want to know not just why you did it, but how you did it and what criteria were used to determine the level of effectiveness. All right. Well, I'm going to go make breakfast.
Well, listen, Eric, we really want to thank you for joining us this morning and leading us in this conversation this morning. It was the fastest hour I've ever spent, I think.
Oh, my goodness. Well, you should blog about that.
You should.
Okay? All of you, if you're not blogging, that's part about professional learning.
Absolutely.
John Dewey said, we don't learn from experience. We learn when we reflect on experience. So if you don't, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of you, you better start blogging.
Well, that's my next personal and professional goal. So you hit the nail on the head right there.
All right.
Yeah, we thank you very much for being there with us this morning. And obviously, we thank all our participants this morning for being there. I think it was a great conversation. I'm sorry. I hope everyone was able to leave with something. Not everyone got a chance to speak this morning. There was just so much going on, but we really appreciate it. I do have a favor for you. If you could share, Eric, Laura Fleming's Twitter handle, because I looked up Laura Fleming on Twitter, but there's about 25 Laura Fleming. So,
all right, I'm gonna do it right now, and I gotta get that. Let's see. I'm just pulling it up. All right.
And while you're doing that, I think there was also some really interesting stuff going on in the chat room, parallel here to.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm gonna put her Twitter handle right in the chat room, so that's gonna pop up right now.
Awesome.
Perfect.
There. All right.
And Eric, we also have a Voxer group where it's just to keep the discussions going between the times that we meet, because there's usually about a week between the sessions. And usually every week we throw out a question so that people can discuss it during the week and give ideas and share quotes or resources. So I think what I'll do now is I'll just give everybody the question. I'll read it and then I'll post it in our Voxer group. So for this week, here's the question. Do the learning spaces in your school or district complement or inhibit the desired pedagogy you're looking for in the classroom? How so? And, well, if you do, if it doesn't inhibit it, how are you going to show it? So that's this week's question. I will post it. It's in our document, our working document. I will post it in our Voxer group. So, feel free to share, tell us what you think, and show us what it looks like in your school.
Nice challenge. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Eric. Appreciate it very much.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Have a good Saturday, everybody.
Have a good morning.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.